Hi, my name's Antony Dunn. I'm poet in residence of the People Powered Press, which you can see behind me here. This letterpress printing press, now also a community interest company, came about almost by accident in 2018. As part of a project called These Northern Types, exploring place-based identity in a book and an exhibition, my colleague Ollie Bentley was working with some community groups around Leeds, whose voices he felt were marginalised in public discourse. He was, at the time, trying to design a typeface that was inherently northern and that was inspired by our industrial heritage, which is another story for another time, and he came up with graft, or graft as he'd have it. He commissioned a local engineering company, JKN OilTools in Batley, to make the letterforms of graft in solid steel, each about 23 centimetres tall and weighing on average about 2 kilograms. His plan was to take the important things his community group members had to say and to print them on very large pieces of paper for public display in the heart of their own communities. The manifesto was, as it still is, to amplify local voices and spread words worth spreading. Ollie intended to lay the steel type on the ground and print the prints using a modified grass roller. But Ian at JKN OilTools wasn't impressed with the scale of his ambition and decided Ollie needed a proper printing press. So he built one, the People Powered Press. It was really big. And once it was delivered, Ollie started wondering if it might be one of the biggest of its kind. And it turns out we do have the largest letterpress printing press of its kind in the world on our hands. It's got a Guinness World Record, which is funny and silly, of course, and to which we hold on lightly. But it does quite helpfully draw some attention to the press and to its work. We've also been lucky enough to have the support of Pop Art Media in Leeds, a company that manages hoardings and billboard sites in public spaces around the city, which has given us free space for prints from the People Powered Press on a number of occasions. We've worked with all kinds of people in the 3 years of the press's working life to date, immigrants to Leeds from around the world, adults with learning disabilities, women in refuge, a Men in Sheds group from Barnsley, school children, and so on. Through creative writing workshops, we've explored issues that concern them, their ambitions, their own life stories. We've written poetry and prose. We've distilled their writing down to phrases short enough to print on the People Powered Press using the steel letters of graft. Among the very first prints made on the People Powered Press as part of the These Northern Types project back in 2018 were the 4 pieces of We Are the Makers of the World, a poem composed by Helen Shea and B. Smith and printed on sheets of paper 1 metre wide and 1.5 metres tall. Now, paradoxically, the obvious challenge of making poetry for the largest letterpress printing press of its kind in the world using the steel letters of graft is that you can only print 4 or 5 lines of text on a sheet, and then you can only get 10 or 11 letters into each line. So these enormous examples of letterpress poetry can only be very, very small poems, as poet Ian Macmillan found when he came for a play date with the press back in 2019. It's effectively 3/4 of a haiku per page, and however much we poets love and strive for concision, that's a pretty tight restriction right there. When Ollie invited me to be poet in residence to the People Powered Press, I was delighted. I've loved working with groups in their creative writing workshops to distill a piece of writing down to a single printable phrase. A particular favourite was the group of immigrants to Leeds whom we encountered through the charity Touchstone, which works to help them integrate into their new communities. We asked them to write about memories of their previous lives in different countries around the world, and we gave them a strict word count limit of 100 words. Then we asked them to tell the same story again in 50 words, then 25, then 10, and then 6. The process forced them to weigh the value of every word that they'd written, to save only the ones doing the most amount of work, very much like the process of writing and editing a poem, at least in my experience. And they created phrases that you could certainly call poetic, if you don't mind haggling over what, if anything, the word actually means. Some were opaque, some were blunt, some were remarkably sad, some were funny, but they were all surprising, and they all told a story. Nazia, one of the Touchstone team, recalled her teenage years in the UK as a woman of Pakistani descent, and her lovely 100-word story boiled down to the rather brilliant shell suits over salwar kameez. Of course, This kind of poem leaves the reader lots of wide open space and lots of work to do, but it is really rewarding. On the other hand, there's a risk that writing a piece this small can result in something a bit fridge magnety, trite, platitudinous, something you might find superimposed on a watercolour painting of a kitten, and that's not at all what we're after. We were invited to take part in the 2019 Hear My Voice Festival in Barnsley and created 4 5-part poems with different groups in different ways. The Men in Sheds group I mentioned earlier talked to me at great length and with great passion about living, working and retiring in Barnsley and about life in the north of England. We lifted phrases from across the transcript of the conversation and made, there's a divide up here. We don't believe in ourselves enough. And this one's a good example of how poetry at this scale is as much about the typesetter's craft as it is about the writer's. See that plangent enough sitting out on its own in the final sheet. Members of the Young Carers Council took part in a creative writing workshop, creating their own poems. But rather than choose a poem by just one of the young people and excluding all the others, we wanted our printed poem by them to feature words by as many of them as possible. So put together the collaborative, decide which way to go. Possibility is what I see from where I stand. Come stand with me. And another collaborative poem by the 4 members of a workshop open to the public, exploring weird and wonderful ways to describe the people and places of Barnsley. Cold face faces etched with tales, our kisses taste of chimney smoke. We talk like history made us. Could use more sun. It also featured my own first poem for the People Powered Press, inspired by the motto of Barnsley, let us be judged by our acts, and by the theme of that year's National Poetry Day, truth. Let me lay out this hard truth and set in steel this fact. Words, words, words. We will be judged against our acts. The impact of words printed by hand at this scale is undeniable, especially in a venue as striking as Elsevier Heritage Centre, where these Barnsley poems were exhibited. But we're working on 2 methods of going bigger. We recently moved into a new building in Saltaire, the World Heritage Site just outside Bradford, where we have a beautiful gable end of a house running the length of our yard. As our contribution to the annual Saltaire Festival, we decided to put a poem on it. So we mounted some plywood boards on the wall and invited some of the team from Pop Art Media to come and teach us how to paste our 1.5 by 1.5 prints to it. I'd already written and printed the poem, editing on the hoof when I realised we didn't have enough letter Fs for what I'd planned, on 3 sheets in landscape format. We'd trimmed them to size and they were ready to go. I was removed from pasting duties after trashing 1 test sheet. And because of the sheer width of the sheets, none of our pasting equipment could allow us to roll the sheets downwards, as you'll have seen people do on billboards. Instead, we had to paste horizontally over 3 meters in the air, using 2 ladders simultaneously and unrolling each sheet of the poem out from right to left, which is emphatically not how the professionals do it. But we did it, and it lasted beyond the end of the festival. And we are buying a movable scaffolding tower next. Incidentally, the letters of graft are milled precisely so that they're compatible with other typesets from the history of letterpress printing in this country. You can just see at the bottom of the poem my signature printed using some very old wood type, which worked seamlessly with graft. So we've discovered a means of printing by hand on a letterpress printing press, longer poems and other pieces of writing, which can be done at large scale and don't have to be fridge magnety at all. We've also recently collaborated with renowned printmakers and designers, Anthony Burrell and Thomas Mayo, to make a modular type system, Brico. Using only 4 different shapes cut into wooden blocks, Brico allows us to make a pretty much infinite variety of letter forms and realizes our ambition to make a system which allows anyone to share in the joy of type design. It also allows us to print letter forms which dwarf even graft. We printed a whole alphabet with Antony and Thomas in letters nearly 1.5 meters tall, and we're currently planning to make a series of murals using this system, which will be pasted up in public sites around the Bradford district. Again, we'll be using words created by participants in local community groups, doing what we can to amplify those local voices and spread their words worth spreading. And we're also going to work with some poets to create really, really big poems, if we can just find a wall tall enough to match our ambition. So thank you for listening. I hope you have enjoyed meeting the People Powered Press, and I hope to see you another day.